Bismillahir-Rahmanir-Rahim. In the name of Allah, the most gracious Muslim. We want to welcome everyone to another In the Path of Islam lecture series, made possible by In the Path of Islam project brought by the Free Library of Philadelphia and by the Building Bridges program of the Doris Duke Foundation of Islamic Art. For more information on future programming, go to freelibrary.org/Path of Islam. Or you could also reach us at pathofislam@freelibrary.org. Today's lecture from the In the Path of Islam lecture series is titled The History of Islam in the Philadelphia African American Community, presented by Abdul-Rahim Muhammad. We are currently at the New Africa Center at 4243 Lancaster Avenue, Philadelphia, PA, 19104, today, Sunday, May 15th. Through pictures of a one-of-a-kind photographs and many photographs, Brother Abdul-Rahim Muhammad, the director of the New Africa Center, shares overlooked histories of enslaved African American Muslims from early America through the Reconstruction era and up to the present day. Participants will learn about enslaved African American Muslim scholars from Abdul-Rahman Sori, the prince among slaves, to Imam W, Muhammad, the son of the Nation of Islam leader Elijah Muhammad, who assumed leadership of the movement after his father's death and transformed it into an al-Islam proper movement. Early movements like the 1960s Dar-Islam Movement and many more emphasized self-determination, economic independence, nationalist politics, and the importance of developing a black identity. The worldview shared by many movements in the African American community was that community members of all denominations could live together in peace and work toward common goals despite the theological differences. Abdul-Rahim Muhammad was raised in West Philly, and as a graduate of Overbrook High School and Community College of Philadelphia, he was an assistant minister of Muhammad Temple No. 12C in West Philly in the early 1970s. In 1975, after the passing of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, he accepted his son Imam W Muhammad as his new leader and teacher and evolved to practice al-Islam properly. In 2001, he completed the Hajj pilgrimage in Mecca, Saudi Arabia. Abdul-Rahim is a recognized leader. He is the founder and executive director of the Islamic Cultural Preservation and Information Council and the New Africa Center, Muslim American Museum and Archive. As a multicultural education consultant, Abdul-Rahim Muhammad designs and implements workshops for K-12 educators and has educated hundreds of students and other educators of Islamic history, culture, and beliefs as part of ICPIC's multicultural education program. This lecture is held in person, so you can come down to 4243 Lancaster Avenue, and this lecture is also virtual. Abdul-Rahim Muhammad.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you and welcome to the New Africa Center, Muslim American Museum and Archive. And it is my honor and pleasure to be hosted by the Philadelphia Free Library and an associate and friend of mine, Dr. Leo. So thank you so much for inviting us here, and we certainly hope that our audience can appreciate what we've worked to establish here. Our primary goal at the New Africa Center, Muslim American Museum and Archive is to preserve and document and interpret the African American Muslim experience and to preserve that legacy so that it doesn't get lost and we can be able to pass that legacy on to future generations. We think it's very, very important for us to preserve this legacy simply because if we don't preserve our legacy and our story, it won't be presented in the proper way and in the manner in which we that have lived that experience would interpret it. So I felt like I was actually mission-driven to do this work. And I'm passionate about this work, and I'm grateful to my Lord that granted me to be able to be used as a tool to help establish this center. And God willing, this center will live long after me and be an institution that those coming after us can continually learn and grow. So, right now we have a very small place, but God willing, we have plans to expand and really becoming a more professional 21st century museum. But as we stand now, we're in this smaller space, and I've laid out about 5 galleries, and we laid out our galleries in such a way that it's like a timeline. So what we'll do is take you through this timeline on how Islam became a faith tradition within the African American community and how Islam has become the second largest faith tradition in this country. But to start with, understanding the basic tenets of Islam, I think that's very, very important that we all understand, and then we'll go through this journey. So we have our first gallery here. It's Through Muslim Eyes Discover Islam. And these gallery highlights the basic pillars of Islam, the 5 pillars of our faith. From a Muslim perspective, Islam is not a new religion. It's a continuation of the religious traditions of the prophets and messengers that came before Prophet Muhammad, whom the Quran was revealed to over 1,400 years ago. So from a Muslim perspective, the basic pillars of our faith are general principles that are followed by all the faith traditions, particularly the monotheist faith traditions of Judaism and Christianity. So Muslims believe in one God. We don't believe in the Trinity. We don't believe in polytheism. We believe in the oneness of God and the oneness of humanity and the oneness of creation. Most faith traditions are built on that basic pillar, or the monotheist faiths are based on that. And those are common traditions that we have with the Christians and Jews. So like we said, Islam from a Muslim perspective is not a new faith tradition. It's a continuation of the message that the previous messengers and prophets of God brought to mankind. The second pillar of Islam is prayer. Muslims try to pray 5 times a day. Within their 5 prayers a day, from dawn to the evening night prayers, Muslims pray 5 times a day. Other faith traditions have traditions of prayer. Prayer is an important component of all faith traditions. Giving and charity. Charity is a high principle in all faith traditions. Christians are really known for their charitable work and charitable giving. I remember as a kid that song that the Christians sung, they give hope, sweet hope, and charity. That's the way you live successfully. How do I know? The Bible tells me so. That's an important part of the Christian faith. It's an important part of Islamic faith. So charity, all the faith traditions adhere to charity. Then fasting. All faith traditions fast in one way or another. The Muslim fast during the month of Ramadan. For 30 days, they don't eat and drink from sun up to sundown. All faith traditions fast. Islam has instituted with the month of Ramadan. And then the last pillar of our faith is pilgrimage to the holy city of Mecca, at least once in your lifetime. All the faith traditions have holy sites, shrines that they go to annually. So Islam is not new. Islam is a continuation of the faith traditions of the past. And we are all people of faith. The big difference is in how we worship through our different traditions. But in principle, we all worship the creator of the heavens and the earth. We call the creator Allah, because that's the Arabic language in which the Quran was revealed to Prophet Muhammad. But Christians speaking Arabs refer to God as Allah. So Allah is not just the God of the Muslims. That's what I hear some Christians telling me, well, I don't worship Allah, I worship God. Allah is just Arabic for the one God. And we all do know the prophets and messengers of God did not come from Europe. They came from the Afro-Asian Semitic lands where they spoke Hebrew, Arabic, and other Semitic languages. They didn't speak Arabic. They didn't speak English. So they didn't refer to the Creator as God. But that's critical thinking. And many of us haven't been trained to think critically. But I just wanted to introduce those basic principles to show that Islam is not new and that we are all one community, and we are communities of faith, Christian, Muslim, and Jews, and all the other faith traditions that are here to worshiping their Lord. So, just to have that basic understanding, I think we can move forward to one of my favorite galleries we have here at the New Africa Center, and that's called our African Muslims Enslaved in America Gallery. Our gallery here African Muslims enslaved in America highlight giants, scholars, men that could speak 3 or 4 or 5 different languages. Most of these men wrote their own biographies. They made such an impression on the society in which they lived. Newspaper reporters wrote about them. Their masters actually had them running their plantations. These men were scholars, and these men were Muslims. African Muslims enslaved here in America. Statistics say somewhere between 40, maybe up to 50% of the Africans enslaved here in America came from West Africa, which we know West Africa is predominantly a Muslim land, Muslim territory, and these men came from these lands. And if over 40 or 50% of the enslaved Africans brought here were Muslims, how did we lose that tradition? How did we lose that connection? One thing that I really place great emphasis on in my presentation about this gallery of African Muslims enslaved in America, when I grew up, the dominant culture here in America was that African people were inferior. African people did not make any major contribution to the world. When I grew up, we used to watch Johnny Weissmuller and playing Tarzan, and the only Africans we seen was some men running around with bones in their noses and acting like a bunch of savages. And that was the image that the West had of Africa. I mean, this is the truth. We gotta remember, look, when you're talking about history, you gotta reflect back on what was the mindset, what was the mentality of the people at that particular time. See, we may be living in 2000, where we at, 22?
2022.
But in 1950, people wasn't thinking like they think today. In 1950, black people were seen as subhuman to a whole bunch of white people. And the culture, the dominant culture, seen us as inferior. So that kind of mindset and mentality is what dominated the American landscape. And so that's why we thought it was so important to highlight this gallery to make the world know we are aware that we weren't no bunch of savages and primitive backward people, and that we made major contributions to the advancement of science and the advancement of man at large. But highlighting that in the Annabella plantations is where the Negro was produced. Negroes did not exist before slavery here in America. James Baldwin said, Negroes do not exist and did not exist and do not exist nowhere but here in America. Just the thought of the horrible psychological damage that slavery have had on our people. It's horrific to think about the condition of slavery. All these people we have hanging up here in our gallery, like I said, are scholars and educated men, come from royal families, like our brother here, Abdul-Rahman. There's a book written about him called The Prince Among Slaves. His father ruled a West African empire that was bigger and more powerful than the United States. All of these men and women, like I said, were highly educated. I have our sister Harriet Tubman here. And a lot of people say, well, why do you have Harriet Tubman in the gallery? I never knew Harriet Tubman was a Muslim. I said, well, at first, I wasn't aware of her lineage of possibly being connected with Muslim lineage. I put her up here because, first of all, she was already a giant and hero among Africans and African American people because of her brave work as an abolitionist freeing our people. But I loved what she said because what she said substantiates the idea that our people were thoroughly brainwashed and brain dead. She said, I have freed many slaves and could have freed thousands more if only they knew they were slaves. Think about that. Here you got people in a condition that don't even realize they in slavery. They're being dehumanized and they think it's normal and natural. That's a terrible thing. So this statement substantiates that the plantations here in America was the laboratory that produced the Negro. But then the idea about Harriet Tubman and her lineage, and did she have lineage to Muslim families? I read in this sister's book here, Servants of Allah. This sister highlights in this book that first of all, Harriet Tubman's birth name was Aranata Ross. Aranata Ross. And you look in any dictionary, any encyclopedia, they say that. Well, yeah, lost. That was her birth name. But this sister here that produced this book, she says that Aranata is an Africanized form of the Arabic name for Amina. And so Aranata really is like Aminata. And Aminata is the Africanized form of the name in Arabic, which is Amina. And Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, mother's name was Amina. And so they say her grandfather named her that name. So we're pretty sure she's in the right gallery, because she come from a grandfather that was a Muslim. So yes, Harriet Tubman do belong in that gallery. And then what she said really substantiates the fact that our people were thoroughly brainwashed and was a new product called the Negro. I left a couple of books here that I would recommend you read if you have further interest in the topic. We have The African Muslims in Annabella, America by Alvin Austin. He was one of the first writers that wrote about African Muslims enslaved in America. And then many, many others built based on this man's work, right? Then I guess everybody that I'm familiar with Alex Haley and his roots, that blockbuster movie that came out, when was that, 76, 77? And that movie really highlighted the fact that Kunta Kinte was an African Muslim. And we were in the early nationalism days, we was like, we told y'all that. We were already Muslims. Well, that Kunta Kinte story verifies it, right? Then our man, Curtis C. Woodson, he makes it clear with the miseducation of the Negro. We have been some miseducated people. And then our post-traumatic slave syndrome. This sister here highlights how many of the psychological behaviors of our community can be traced back to this particular slave period. Don't think just because, one generation died, another generation come up, that everything is going to be all new. No, things are passed on. And not just passed on through being learned behavior. And many of the behaviors that we pass on are already coded in our DNA. So we got a lot of work to do. So, African Muslims enslaved in America manufactured the Negro. And then we lost our connection to our ancestral past. We lost our connection to our religious traditions. We lost our names. We lost our history. We lost our culture. We lost our heritage. We were affecting in the African American community today? And how did Islam get to be the second largest faith tradition here in America? Well, we're going to take you on a journey, a timeline, to highlight various individuals and organizations and movements that brought Islam to the African American community and brought it to where it is today. So, we'll move on now to talking about our brother Edward Blythe. Our brother Edward Blythe. Edward Blythe was the first African American or West Indian scholar that wrote about Islam and its relationship with other faith traditions. And Edward Blythe, he himself was a missionary. He was a missionary. He was a Christian preacher. But he wrote this classic book called Christianity, Islam, and the Negro Race. Edward Blythe says in this book that Islam is more compatible for Africans and African people than Christianity. And he himself was a Christian minister saying this. Well, why would he say Islam was more compatible for people of color than Christianity? He said because Islam allowed the African people to maintain their cultural life and maintain their cultural traditions as long as it did not violate the principles of the Quran and the principles of our faith. But we're under Christianity, and we got to remember the timeline we're talking about. Edward Blythe wrote this book in like the 1890. The mindset and mentality of Europeans was that if you want to be a good Christian, you have to follow the ways of the king's way, right? Follow the king's tradition. Dress like the king. And if you dress anything other than like the king, then you are considered backwards and savage and, less than. So Edward Blythe said you don't have that problem in Islam. People can still maintain their cultural traditions and still be practicing Islam and seen as fellow brothers and sisters. Edward Blythe was not only one that said that Islam was more compatible for Africans and African American people. A lot of people refer to Edward Brayton as the father of black nationalism. We have to remember, people referred to black nationalism in the 60s and then in the very early 1900s. The idea of black nationalism was a natural thing because we weren't treated fairly here in America. And if you're getting sick and tired of being mistreated by your oppressor, then you want to escape from them. You don't want no part of it. So they were fighting to liberate our people. And we can't see them as being anti-establishment. The establishment was anti-against us. So they were just reacting and dealing with a problem they had, and they was trying to find solutions to solve their problem. And so many of them said, look, we need to cut ties with these people and set up our own governments and set up our own economic system because we can't seem to make it here. I mean, that sounds like good sense to me. So that's Edward Blyden. Edward Blyden with his powerful book, Christianity, Islam, and the Negro Race. That was the academic scholarship. Then we have Abdul-Rahim. Abdul-Rahim founded the Moorish Science Temple in 1913 in Newark, New Jersey. And he began to teach and educate our people, about our ancestral past and helping our people deal with the issue of an identity crisis. He said, we aren't no Negroes. He said, we're not Negroes. He said, we're Moors. He said that we come from the great empires of the Moors and Spain that brought civilization to Europe and brought about the Renaissance. He said that's our lineage, that's our history, that's our culture. So become a Moor. No, he ain't write no Quran and distribute no Muhammad Ali Quran to people or no other translation of English Qurans to the people because there wasn't any. He wrote his own little book called the Holy Quran. And people want to stand around talking about this man, he writing the Quran and all that. The man was doing the best he could. And what was he doing? He was trying to reconnect our people to our heritage and our lineage. And he did a great job in doing the job. We got this book right here. The Golden Age of the Moors. And Stanley Manpool, he highlighted how the African Muslims went into Spain from Morocco and conquered Spain in 711. And how these African Muslims ruled Spain for close to 1,000 years. And it was through their cultural and intellectual contributions that brought about the Renaissance in Europe and brought Europeans out of the Dark Ages. These were black people we lost that connection. And so he was trying to reconnect us. We have to understand what these men were doing and appreciate the great work they done. The other brother that also was a major influence was our brother Marcus Garvey. Marcus Garvey founded the Universal Negro Improvement Association. And his organization worked to help uplift our people economically. He established this Black Star Line and was working to develop international trade and connecting Africans and West Indies and African American and other international businesses to do business with one another and pull ourselves up. They see Marcus Garvey as a major threat. People say there were more followers with Marcus Garvey than there was with Dr. King and the Civil Rights Movement. And that sounds like some practical sense to me, to have black people getting behind this man because they were all being oppressed. And this man came up with an idea to try to pull our people up. And then the idea of going back to Africa, President Lincoln was even promoting that. Oh yeah, set up Liberia. Let these Negroes go back to Africa. He wasn't against that. So we gotta remember, like I'm saying, how important it is to remember what was the mentality and social, economic, and political realities of that particular time. If you missing that point, then you won't see the value of these men and their work. All right, that's Marcus Garvey, right? Then we have our brother Muhammad Sadiq. He actually came right here in Philadelphia. Could be talking about this Philadelphia story. Right here in Philadelphia in 1920. And began to introduce Islam to our communities. And that's when the Ahmadiyya movement began to be introduced to our people. And introducing Islam to the African American community.
We appreciate everybody for coming out today and witnessing another In the Path of Islam lecture series with our lecturer, Brother Rahim Muhammad, and we're at the New Africa Museum. Excellent learning opportunity. This will be on the line. You can look up In the Path of Islam lecture series, and you can find all of our previous lectures. You can recap Brother Rahim Muhammad's lecture, so you can learn all of this fantastic information and delve deeper into the investigation behind the information he pointed out. We didn't have enough time for him to go much deeper. There's loads of other information here and loads of other documents. So we welcome you to continue this journey of In the Path of Islam with us on our next lecture series. Just Google us, check us out, and register for the next one. Thank you.